Pamela Smart's story is a bit like a true crime soap opera that actually happened, and it all went down in the early 90s. Her case became a public sensation because of elements of love, betrayal, manipulation, and murder. Her trial was televised, and movies were inspired by her story. Even we watched To Die For on VHS when we were teenagers.
There's no soap opera to this. It's real stuff.
Pamela was born August 16, 1967, in Coral Gables, Florida, but she mostly grew up in New Hampshire. She was raised in a pretty conservative household, was a good student, and by all accounts seemed like a typical teenager. She went to Florida State University and studied communications, which is kind of ironic considering what ended up happening with her case and the media frenzy around it. After college, she got married to Gregory Smart in 1989. They were a young couple. Pamela was only 22, and everything probably seemed pretty promising. They were living in Derry, New Hampshire, and Pamela landed a job as a media service coordinator at a local high school in nearby Hampton.
Not even a year into their marriage, though, things went completely sideways. In May of 1990, Greg Smart was found dead in their condo, shot in the head.
You know why he's passed out there, man?
He's on the way. Do you know why he's passed out? No, we don't know.
At first, it looked like a robbery gone wrong, but pretty quickly the investigation started turning in another direction. It came out that Pamela had been having an affair with a 15-year-old student named Billy Flynn, who she'd met through her job at the school. She was supposed to be this trusted adult at the high school, but she was spending time outside of work with her students, including Billy.
Now this is where things get really messy and why the case became so infamous. Billy confessed to killing Greg and said he hadn't acted alone. He had done it with a couple of friends who helped him out. He also claimed that Pamela was the mastermind behind it all, saying she convinced him that killing her husband was the only way for them to stay together. According to him, she said that she didn't want to go through a divorce because she would lose everything. Billy was in love with her and young enough to be totally manipulated, at least according to the prosecution.
The case went to trial in 1991, and it was one of the first criminal cases to be fully televised in the U.S., so it was everywhere. You have to remember there was no internet, so people were glued to their TVs following the story. This was a pre-O.J. Simpson case, and it had the same sort of media circus vibe, and everyone in the country was weighing in on it. People were shocked by the scandalous details, this love affair between a young teacher and high school student, and then the murder of her husband because of it. The media ran with it, casting Pamela as this manipulative femme fatale.
The prosecution painted her as cold and calculating, someone who used her looks and charm to manipulate this young boy into murdering her husband. They showed footage of her smiling and looking unfazed during the trial, and that just made the public more convinced of her guilt. The defense, though, argued that Billy and his friends were acting on their own, that Pamela had nothing to do with the murder plot, and that the whole story about her manipulating them was exaggerated.
Jury to recommend this. You swear the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Have a seat. State your full name, please.
Pamela Ann Smart.
In the end, though, the jury believed the prosecution. Pamela was convicted as an accomplice to first-degree murder, along with charges of conspiracy to commit murder and witness tampering. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and she's been behind bars ever since. Billy Flynn and the other boys got lighter sentences because they cooperated with the authorities. Flynn ended up serving nearly 25 years before he was paroled in 2015, while the other two boys also served significant time but were eventually released.
Flynn was granted parole.
That makes me angry. I have a hard time understanding how they have so much forgiveness for the person that actually killed Greg, and none for me. Some days I really wonder, am I ever going to get out of here? Like, what's it going to be like to die in here? When I start thinking like that, I wish that I would have had the death penalty versus life in prison.
Since her conviction, Pamela has continued to insist that she is innocent and that she never wanted her husband dead. She claimed that the teenagers acted independently and that she's been unfairly painted as a villain. Over the years, she's filed multiple appeals and clemency requests, but all have been denied. While in prison, she's actually done a lot to improve herself. She's earned 2 master's degrees and gotten involved in prison support and educational programs, trying to help other inmates. Her supporters argued that she's been a model prisoner and that her sentence was too harsh, especially since Billy, the one who actually pulled the trigger, has been released.
It wasn't until the summer of 2024 that Pamela accepted any responsibility for her actions involving the death of her husband. The case is controversial to this day because people have such different opinions on Pamela's role in the murder. Some think she got what she deserved, that she manipulated Billy Flynn into killing her husband so she wouldn't lose anything in her divorce. But others argue that the media portrayal of her was completely unfair and that she might not have been convicted if it hadn't been for how the media cast her as a heartless seductress. Many people say that this was one of the first trial-by-media cases, where the constant television coverage and the way the media framed her influenced public opinion and potentially the jury's decision. The footage from her trial was broadcast widely, and her calm demeanor in court didn't help her in the public's eye. They saw her as cold and unfeeling, that she was a manipulative mastermind.
Since then, Pamela's story has been turned into several books, documentaries, and movies. The 1995 movie To Die For, starring Nicole Kidman, was loosely based on her case, and it really plays up the idea of the media-obsessed woman who will do anything to get what she wants. And more recently, her case has been featured in true crime shows and podcasts. An HBO documentary in 2019 called Captivated: The Trials of Pamela Smart explored how the media influenced her trial, asking whether she might have gotten a fairer trial without all the sensational coverage.
Her supporters say the media used her looks, gender, and the affair to make her look like the ultimate villain. They argue that it's sexist, pointing out that a man in her position might not have been portrayed in such an extreme way. On the other hand, there are plenty who think she's guilty and that her life sentence was justified, saying that she knew exactly what she was doing when she got involved with Billy and convinced him to kill her husband.
Pamela is still fighting to get her sentence reduced or to get some form of clemency, but she has had no luck so far. Even though she's done a lot to rehabilitate, the courts haven't budged, and her case still draws a lot of strong reactions. Her story has become part of a pop culture landscape in a way, and her trial is often remembered as a moment when the media started heavily influencing public perception of criminal cases. It's a story that makes you wonder about guilt, innocence, and how much our opinions are shaped by what we see on TV.
So that's the whole saga of Pamela Smart, whether she truly was the villain that the media made her out to be. Back then, a teacher having an affair with a student was very taboo. Unfortunately, we've seen that more and more in the media these days. What do you think about this case? Let us know in the comments below.